790 KABC.
Welcome back. Ledger on the Law, 790 KABC, joined in studio with elder law abuse attorney Carl Mcmahan. Carl, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
Phil, Carl is an elder law abuse expert. He comes in to help our listeners with some of the worst cases that of all time. When I heard that 911 call where the operator is saying, resuscitate this lady or she is going to die, one of the things that I thought was maybe there's a do not resuscitate order. Carl's informed me that is not the case because that wouldn't be applicable if there was one. Tell our listeners why you said that, Carl.
Sure. Well, a do not resuscitate or a DNR is for the situation where we had that poor girl in Florida, Shivo, that we all recall, who had permanent brain damage, and she was in a vegetative state. Prior to something like that, the family can issue a DNR, do not resuscitate. This was not that case at all from what I read. This was a person who had something stuck in their throat or whatever and wasn't breathing, needed CPR. And there's no policy of any, I read in the paper, well, there was a policy not to resuscitate. Well, that's nonsense. There's no policy against saving a human life in a facility like that. So that doesn't make any sense to me.
So a DNR really applies to that controlled environment where everybody's at the bedside, the family is fighting. Some people are saying do not resuscitate. Some people are saying cut off life support, and others are fighting over it. And then there's the wishes of the person laying there in the bed, the living, the medical power of attorney, if you will. That is a DNR. This is different. Apparently, what I was thinking, and it was totally incorrect. A DNR for Phil, for example, if you're in an auto accident and the police arrive at the scene and my legs are just hanging there, it's not like they're going to save my life, right?
Correct. Correct.
Okay.
This was an emergent situation. It wasn't a DNR at all, from what I read in the LA Times. And this person, in my view, should have resuscitated, performed simple CPR, and the person would be alive today in all likelihood.
Well, Carl said he'd take that case. By the way.
Yeah, I would imagine. Yeah. Let me ask you. Is there anything that the family would have signed upon putting their mother in this home that basically says they are not at fault for allowing her to die like this? Is there anything that could have been in those, I'm sure, massive amounts of documents that they'd have to sign?
No family member can sign away somebody's human rights and human life. Requirements. There's nothing like that.
I thought the 911 agent was awesome. She did a great job. She did everything she could do. And the guilt that the person that was on the other line must be enormous. She was so detached. How can you be so emotionally detached when somebody's dying right in front of you?
I don't understand that. And she wouldn't even hand the phone over to somebody else who this 911 operator would have talked through the situation.
I want to hear what our listeners have to say. 800-222-KABC. If you have an opinion on whether or not that 911 call was a crime, whether or not you think Carl should take the case if he's called upon to take the case. Carl is smiling. He has no doubt that he would sign that family if they were interested.
And if you're a family member of the woman who was in the
No. Carl's too busy. He does not need the radio show to solicit business. Carl, talk about some of your cases that rise to this level, just the egregious behavior in these homes.
Sure. And thank you for that question. What I typically see is, happy birthday to your mother, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
The kind of clients I represent are clients our age, typically, that have labored over the idea of, well, I've got my mom or dad are getting old. People like us have our own children, but we have adult parents. What am I going to do now with my poor mom or dad? And they come to the point where they just can't take care of themselves. And it's a big decision to put someone in a nursing home, a skilled nursing facility, as you're contemplating.
No, I'm not.
No.
You're going to get them in so much trouble.
Right. Well, at any rate, the people I see come to me, and they're absolutely shocked and mortified and sad and guilty because they found out that their parent has been mistreated or abused in a nursing home, that they put them in all good faith and
so it's usually the child of one of the patients.
Correct.
Are they considered patients, or what are they? Residents.
Residents.
So it's usually the children that come in and say, I put my mother, my father in this home. I spent a ton of money to do so.
Correct.
And they're mistreating them.
Totally. And what they find out, what's been concealed from them, quite frankly, by this group of operators, is that they've been abused or neglected and they have terrible bed sores or decubitus ulcers, or they have infections, or they have any number of things that happen in this setting, which is awful.
Carl, how are these facilities rated? Like, in other words, can a family member go on a website, a national website, or a state or local website that rates these facilities on how they take care of people?
Not really, but one thing a consumer can do is go to the Department of Health Services, DHS, and it's public information, and ask for the DHS file on a particular facility. And you look for prior complaints issued against this facility, and the DHS must provide that to you. So in the case of a skilled nursing facility, the DHS has a file. In the case of residential nursing facilities, the Department of Social Services has those records. So that's a good way of looking that up, but I'm unaware of any sort of rating system that way.
But you've told us on past shows that there are some repeat offenders. So the people who have offended in the past seem to be doing it again and again?
Absolutely, and that'll show up in the DHS file because the DHS, the Department of Health Services, in the case of a skilled nursing facility, if that nursing facility is investigated and cited, for example, a Class A citation, that's the worst. That'll be in the DHS file.
And these aren't hospitals. Sometimes there's not even a doctor on staff. It sounded like on the 911 tape there was no doctor in the house.
Correct. These are not hospitals. They're called skilled nursing facilities. Primarily, they have.
How difficult is it to get a license as a skilled nursing facility? Is it difficult?
It's not that difficult, and that's part of the problem. And sadly enough, we have a group of operators out there. They're good facilities. Don't get me wrong. But there are a group of operators out there that are looking to cut corners and, frankly, are predators, in my opinion. I mean, this is a very vulnerable section of our population. People like us, have our parents admitted and assume that there's going to be great care. But what happens is there's a group of operators that tries to cut costs, particularly nursing care costs, because that's the top line item in terms of expense. And they hire understaffed, undertrained, typically immigrants that are here, quite frankly, many of the times can't speak English. So how is the parent supposed to even talk to them? So it's an awful situation.
Carl, when a facility is cited or even investigated and then cited, what happens at that point? Are they shut down? Are they, for a certain amount of time, are they expected to do anything?
Yes. When a facility like that is cited with a deficiency, they must correct it in order to maintain their license. And what does that mean, correct it?
Well,
just correct the offense? There's a list of correct the citation. They've got to come into compliance with whatever they're cited with, and that's an ongoing evaluation by the Department of Health Services to make sure that they've improved or taken care of whatever they were cited with. If they don't do it, then their license will be revoked.
Attorney Carl Mcmahan, 800-222-5222 if you want to join our discussion. 800-222-KABC. We are talking about elder law abuse. Carl's an expert on the subject. Now is your time. If you suspect that your parents had been injured in a nursing home, now is your time to talk about the issue and get some advice from one of the best in the legal field on the subject. Before we get to some of those calls, I have Arlen, who's been holding since the very beginning of the show. Arlen, welcome to Ledger on the Law.
Thank you.
How can we help?
I would like to know where a person can go if he feels that a judge hasn't treated him fairly in a courtroom procedure.
Well, Arlen, tell us about that.
It was a family law proceeding, and as part of her defense against my OSC, the procedure that you bring in family court.
Yeah, for those who don't know, an OSC is an order to show cause, and that's a proceeding where a judge will often, it's basically a hearing that a judge will want to discuss a particular issue. What was your OSC about?
Acquiring more visitation time with my son.
Okay.
And just to make it, I guess, I got fatherhood status with this child through a procedure where I was held out to be the father, but I wasn't considered the biological father. It wasn't determined that I was, but because I held him out to be my son, I was awarded fatherhood status.
Were you paying child support?
Just a small amount of voluntary support, no court-ordered support.
Okay, I'm going to give you a phone number. It's 818-596-2114. That's Naz Baruti. She's one of our experts on family law. She's promised me that if people call on the show and have a family law issue, that she'll take the call and she'll help you out. Call her Monday, 9 a.m. That's Naz Baruti from the Baruti Law Firm, 818-596-2114. You can appeal a judge's decision, and your appellate rights differ according to the particular case. But don't forget, I sit as a judge pro tem, and I've never been appealed, but that's not to say that I may not have made a mistake. So don't be afraid to exercise your rights. Even judges are fallible, and if your judge has made a mistake, the first thing I would do is, in the family court, not set an appeal. That's not really the process, but you can set another OSC to have the previous order modified. But Naz Baruti is going to fill you in on that. Again, you're looking for a secondary OSC. Thanks for the call, Arlen.
Thank you.
I need to take a quick break. When I return, much more on elder law abuse with attorney Carl Mcmahan. Again, attorney Carl Mcmahan after the break. You're listening to Ledger on the Law, 790 KABC.
This is the News and Talk Authority, the legendary 790 KABC.
Welcome back, California, 790 KABC. Ledger on the Law, 2:34 on March 23rd, 2013. I'm joined in studio with attorney Carl Mcmahan. We're talking elder abuse and medical malpractice. During the break, I learned something very interesting. Medical malpractice has a cap. Elder abuse does not. Explain that, Carl.
Certainly. In 1975, the California legislature decided to enact something called MICRA, which limited damages in medical malpractice cases for a perceived crisis in the medical industry, which may or may not have existed. It's never been increased for inflation since that time. It's a $250,000 cap in medical malpractice cases. So if you're injured or killed by a physician, it's $250,000 unless you can prove economic loss.
So practically speaking, when we were talking about the 911 caller earlier and the resident at the nursing home that was passed away due to the fact that she wasn't resuscitated, or at least partially for that reason, that was a nursing home. If that was a hospital, the family could recover $250,000 maximum. And in this case, because it's a nursing home, there is no cap. That nursing home could be on the hook for millions of dollars.
That's correct. I mean, it's unequal. This is my personal view, of course. I think it's unequal legislation, this 1975 cap, because the rest of us who aren't elders are subjected to a $250,000 cap. Yet the legislature, frankly, in 1991 came along.
Is that inflation adjusted? $250,000.
It's nothing.
Phil spends that on dinner.
Well, it is nothing. It's never, and that's the problem. And the author has since come out publicly and said we never intended that cap in 1975 not to have an inflation factor. It was a mistake. So I think that's very powerful, and I'm hoping we now have a super legislature. Governor Brown, my understanding is he's solicited a bill to reform this legislation and increase the limits.
So a lot of our listeners don't understand this, but what this means is if you're in the hospital and you go in for a surgery and they're going to amputate your right leg and the doctor makes a mistake and takes off your left, subsequently, of course, that right has to go also. That was the original reason for the procedure. So you have no legs after this mistake by the doctor. $250,000 is all you're going to get.
And I've got a prime example. It's called the wrong kidney case that my former mentor and I handled, Dave Harney, where they took out the wrong kidney.
Oh, my God.
They took out the healthy kidney, and to make it worse, rather than just look at it, they sandwiched it to try to find the cancer, and of course didn't find it. The radiologist had flipped the x-ray from right to left in the x-ray box. The jury came back after trial for $5.4 million. The judge cut the verdict to $254,000.
Oh, gosh.
Wow.
So I don't think there's anything fair about that, and it circumvents the whole jury system, in my view.
800-222-KABC. If you think the $250,000 medical malpractice cap, which was put in place in 1975 with no inflationary factor to it, if you think that's unconscionable, we want to hear from you.
And what was the reason, do you think, for the cap in the first place?
Well, the whole thing was there was a perceived crisis in physicians' insurance rates. And that was the push. But it was really, in our view, history seems to point out that it was an insurance-driven motive to try to increase profits, and that's the case these days. The insurance company profits in California, the insurers that insure physicians and hospitals are making a fortune. So it's very unfair to the consumers, and I hope the listeners call their representatives and see what they can do to get it changed.
Let's hear what our audience has to say. We have an open mic policy here at KABC. We do not, we take both sides of the story, and I think Dean disagrees with us. Dean from Van Nuys, welcome to the show.
Hi, I'm an anesthesiologist. I happened to be a medical student in 1975 during the doctor's strike. Medical malpractice premiums had gone up 3 or 4 times. To be honest with you, I can't remember the exact amount because I was a student at that time, not paying medical malpractice as I am now. I'm an anesthesiologist, and you're prevaricating when you say that all you can get is $250,000. The $250,000 cap pays pain and suffering, which was a lottery-type payment at that time. And micro legislation has actually saved a lot of money for patients because it allows the physicians to decrease the amount of money that it costs them to pay for medical malpractice. My medical malpractice at the time that I finished my residency for anesthesia in 1981 would have been $20,000 per year, and it has steadily decreased. And the premiums that I pay for medical malpractice are lower now than they would have been.
Carl, jump in here. What do you have to say to Dean?
Well, first of all, Doctor, it's nice to meet you over the telephone, and I want to thank you for your service. My view is, and having defended doctors and anesthesiologists, my view is that physicians and nurses have a calling. And frankly, I don't believe this is about you. What I think is happening here is managed care, and managed care has come in and limited your ability to practice medicine, in my view. And the microcap, I think, frankly, in my view, the managed care industry and the insurance companies are hiding behind the microcap, and now, which I think hurts the patients and you. But I understand what you're saying about premiums. I mean, I pay $22,000 a year for legal malpractice insurance, and I don't even operate. So, I mean, malpractice insurance is high. But
it is high, and I don't mean to laugh at you, but the micro legislation has stood the test of time. And for example, in Florida,
Dean, let me ask you a question. Dean, let me interrupt you. Let me ask you a serious question. Do you think your life is worth more than $250,000? Dean?
You know, I understand there's dead air there. I'm sorry. I'm trying to think. And clearly, you know, it's like that old line from Jack Benny: "Your money or your life." Just a minute, I'm thinking. So
take your time.
The reality is, yes, of course, it's worth more than that if you take my opinion for it. But on the other hand, when you're gauging pain and suffering, this is purely an emotional response, as opposed to what are your medical expenses, and those are obviously paid.
Dean, let me interrupt you just for a second. Dean, don't filibuster. Let me interrupt you for just a second. This is what Carl does day in and day out, and what he doesn't like about the 1975 legislation is that this is passed by legislators. One of the best things in this country is our jury process, and this is what the amount of damages, that subjective issue that you're talking about. You know, where does the value lie? That should be left up to the jurors. Is that what you're saying, Carl?
Yes, the Seventh Amendment guarantees a right to a civil jury trial, and in our view, this legislation, these are legislators that enacted this that are circumventing the Seventh Amendment, and it's 38 years old now.
Yeah, but when you talk about that jury trial, you're talking about 12 people who are really selected by the lawyer because they're not the most intelligent people.
Dean, you can't bash
somebody
the whole
who's
legal
probably dodging
system.
jury duty.
Right? Oh, come on now.
I've done my jury duty. I've done my time, and I know what those people are like that are my colleagues on the jury. And you just look at the Bell trial for a current example. But at any rate, I truly think that medical malpractice should be adjudicated by a jury of physician peers or judges that are knowledgeable about medical practice and the law, as opposed to letting it go to a jury which is open to be swayed. And if you look at
Dean, hold on a second. Let me ask you this, just a very simple question then.
Yes.
You said your life is worth more than $250,000 after thinking about it. What would be a reasonable cap? If you want to say we should have a cap on it because of malpractice insurance or whatever else, what would be a reasonable cap to you? What is your life?
Before he answers that, Phil, it takes Dean needs to think.
He needs a minute.
So think about that for a second, Dean. I'm going to put you on hold and take another caller. So
okay.
Give Dean some time to think for a second. Fred from Los Angeles, welcome to the show.
Yeah, hi, I have a question for Carl.
Go ahead.
Hello. Yeah, hi, Carl.
Yes,
I just
sir.
went into a board and care home, and there's several little things that need to be fixed to be happy there.
Tell me.
I just moved in. Well, they have an outbreak of bed bugs there.
Oh, jeez.
So they gave me a new bed. So I told them that I was still itching, and they changed my linen. So that seemed to fix the problem. So that's not a complaint. Yes.
Fred, Phil has lived with this condition forever.
I
So
know.
he
There's no
feels for you.
fixing bed bugs, buddy. You need a lawyer, man.
Now, is this something that's actionable, Carl, on a serious note?
Well, I don't outbreak of bed bugs, probably not, but I'm concerned about the sanitation or the sanitary conditions you're in. How else do you feel about the place?
Well, they screw up with my medicine. I go over and see a friend every weekend, and they're supposed to have my medicine ready for me, and they don't. And I can't find my medicine, and they don't have all of it. But I have no place to go. If I leave there, I'll be homeless. I have only been there a couple of months.
Goodness.
So I wanted to ask you, do you have your phone number, Carl, so I can ask you if I have a question, I can call you?
Yeah, I think we can. I don't know if we get that off the air.
Go
or how
ahead.
we do
Go
that.
ahead and give it out.
It's 310
Yes.
479
479
8827.
8827. One more quick question. Who governs a board and care home? Is it the ombudsman or is it the licensing board?
It's the Department of Social Services.
Oh, it's the Department of Social Services.
DSS, not DHS. DSS handles the board and cares.
DESS. You know how I get their number?
You can look it up, but if you call me, I've got it. I can give it to you.
Okay, and one more before you hang up on me. 479-8827. First-time listener, and I love your program.
Great.
Thank you, Fred.
Informative. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. We need to take a quick break. When I return, we're going to go to many more callers. We see you all holding. We're going to get to you. You're listening to Ledger on the Law, 790 KABC. I'll be right back.
You're tuned to the legendary 790 KABC.
Welcome back, California. Ledger on the Law, 790 KABC. The trouble with the legal profession is that 98% of its members give the rest of us a bad name. And we've got the 2% right here on the show here, Ledger on the Law. I want to go to some calls. If you want to join our show, 800-222-5222 to be part of the program. Dean, we haven't forgotten about you. The reason I put you on the hold wasn't because you needed time to think. Phil is on the air with 2 attorneys and an anesthesiologist, and that's just way more than he can handle.
That's above my pay grade.
I had to give Phil a break so he could gather his thoughts. But before I get back to Dean, I got Richard from San Juan Capistrano. Welcome to Ledger on the Law.
Yes, sir, and thank you. I had my wife had a meningioma tumor and had a bad operation, and she was going to have to go into a skilled nursing facility, and I found this out that they were going to kick her out of the hospital with about a half a day's notice, and so they gave me a list of skilled nursing facilities in my local area so I could have good visiting hours. And I went around looking, and I was almost crying because they were really bad. So I used one of the things that Mother Nature gave me to find one, and that was my nose. And let me tell you, when you walk into one and you smell the fecal matter and the urine and God knows what, you sure in hell don't want to put your loved ones in that. And unfortunately, my nose pointed out this other one, and she was happy and I was happy.
Give him a shout out on the air, Richard. If you have a good facility, tell us the name. Go ahead.
I have another. I'm 80, and I've got another small, minor memory problem. It's
Not a problem, Richard. If you want to,
It's right up by Sears in the big shopping mall in Laguna Woods.
I'll tell you what, Richard. If you call Carl's office and tell him the name, we'll give a shout out on the show for a facility that's your nose told you, just like your gut, that it was the right place to house your wife.
Okay, I'll look it up and call you back. It's one of those things. My daughter went. It starts with a VV. My daughter went to Verde Valley School while I was working overseas, and I keep getting them mixed up. Anyhow, also tell Carl that if he really thinks this legislature is good, I hope he doesn't have a Proposition 13 tax break. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the call, Richard. We really appreciate you listening to the show. Okay, we're going to go to Kurt from Los Angeles. Kurt, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for taking the call. You had a defense attorney on earlier, and I always want to know, I've been on a couple of juries, why jurors can't ask the lawyers questions. It seems to me it would dispel a lot of ignorance, misconceptions, and the attorneys could find out that, juror number whoever is way out in left field like we found out with O.J. So if the jurors could ask the attorneys questions. That's
a great question in and of itself, Kurt. And as you may or may not know, laws are state specific. We have federal laws, of course, that cover the entire United States. But each state, especially when it deals with local trials, writes its own laws. And as you know or may not know, in Arizona on this Jodi Arias case, they do allow the jurors to ask questions. I think one of the concerns is that it somewhat can create a little bit of pandemonium like it did in the Bell case. Not the juror questioning. In California, what the jurors can do is they can pose questions to the judge, but they don't have a right to pose a question right to the defendant. Carl, you want to chime in on that?
Yes. Hi, Kurt. It's Carl. Are you asking about jurors asking lawyers questions during what's called voir dire, that is the jury selection portion, or during the testimony?
During the case. So jurors, the attorneys will present evidence, and then a juror might say, gee, where did Robert Blake have the gun, or you said this or that, or, I thought they left at midnight, and that kind of thing.
It's interesting. I've tried a lot of cases. That has happened. It depends on the judge sometimes. I've had 2 jury trials where the judge actually allowed the jurors to submit questions during testimony, which was fascinating, but it's very rare. Of course, jurors can ask questions during the voir dire part when they're being selected, and there's a dialogue between the lawyers. Generally speaking, yes, during the testimony it's not allowed. But after the testimony, jurors could submit questions to the judge based upon their evaluation of the testimony.
And I think one of the fears, and the reason we have it set up this way in California, Kurt, is that if you're not careful with that line, the jurors can start to influence the trial in and of themselves. Just the question itself may lead a person to adopt a certain position, and neither of the attorneys are really want that to be part of the case in chief.
Kurt, I have to ask, was Robert Blake one of the juries that you sat on?
No.
Damn. All right.
Thanks for the call, Kurt. We have a lot of callers holding. I have time for just a couple more. Dean, I'm going to try to get back to you. If I don't, you're going to have to call in next week. Calvin from Culver City, welcome to the show.
Welcome. Thank you. My question is, I've had a handicap placard for about 20 years, but unfortunately I forget to use it sometimes. Now, I have 2 fines that has risen to about $1,400. I wanted to ask you, should I go, since I live in Culver City, should I go before a Santa Monica judge and ask for some kind of relief, pay something, but hope for reduction?
So, are you handicapped, Calvin?
At times. Sometimes my back goes out on me. Sometimes the pain in my right foot is so severe, but it lasts maybe 3 days.
So what are your tickets for? Somebody suggesting that you're using these placards and you're not handicapped?
No, I am handicapped. Well, I got it legally from DMV for 20 years because my doctor diagnosed me with a bad back that goes out on me sometimes, and I can't move for a while.
Okay.
So what I did, I parked in. Yes. Go ahead.
So, Calvin, I'm going to have to put you on hold and just kind of answer your question. And then again, if you want to call in next week, we can spend more time because we're coming to the end of the show. I do appreciate the call. If you are truly handicapped, that you're not using these handicap placards illegally, just go before the judge, explain to him, bring a doctor's note, and you should be just fine. We can go into more detail. You can call my office, call Carl's office during the week. We'd happily expand on it. This is coming to the end of the show. I want to thank you, Carl, for coming in. Such a great show. The phones have lit up when you come in, Carl. I hope you come back and answer more questions in the future.
Really appreciate it. Thank you.